जनकानन
यशोमती नंदन व्रजवर गोकुल
जमुना तट चर गोपी बसना हर जमुना चर गोपी बसना हर जमुना तट चर गोपी बसना हर
जमुना तट चर गोपी
जमुना तट चर गोपी बसन हर जमुना 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 तट चर गोपी बसन हर जमुना तट चर गोपी बसन रास रसिक कृपमय रास रसिक कृपमय रास रसिक कृपमय रास रसिक कृपमय श्री राधवल्लभ वृंदावन लत बर श्री श्री राधवल्लभ वृंदावन लत बर भक्ति विनोद आश्रय ओ भक्ति विनोद आश्रय यशोमती नंदन ब्रजबर नागर गोकुलरन जनकानन यशोमती नंदन ब्रजबर नागर गोकुलरन जनकानन जशोमति नंदन ब्रज बर नागर गोकुलरं जनकाना जशोमति नंदन ब्रज बर नागर गोकुलरं जनकाना गोकुलरं जनकाना गोकुलरं गोकुलरञ्जनकाना 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 जशोमति नंदन ब्रज बर नागर गोकुलरञ्जनकाना हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण
कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम हरे राम
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण
कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम हरे राम 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 हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे
कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to all of you. Thank you so much for joining this morning for our daily Srimad Bhagavatam classes. And today we have Her Grace Vrindavaneshwari Devi Dasi Mataji from Philadelphia. Thank you, Mataji, for giving your association. And whenever you're ready, we can start today's session.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Good morning. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girvaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vadachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girvaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girvaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astatari Satas Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astatari Satas Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrina Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Girdhar Govardhan Ki Jai. Mayapurdam Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai, ISKCON Harrisburg Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Gaur Pramanande, Hari Bol. All glories, the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories, the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories, the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, Hari Bol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Pashita Deshatarane. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottama Devam Sarasvatim Vyasyam Chaturdayar Madhurayat Nastaprayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, 13th chapter, verse 59. The chapter is Dhritarashtra quits his body. And so I'll read the Sanskrit 3 times, and then you can take turns. So Vidurastu tad asharyam nishayam kurunandana harsha shoka yutastashmad ganta tirtha nishivaka. Vidurastu tad ascharyam nishayam kurunandaya harsha shoka yutastashmad ganta tirtha nishevaka. Vidurastu tad ascharyam nishamya kurunandana harsha shoka yutastashmad ganta kirta nishevaka. Anyone else like to go?
Vidurastu tad asharyam nishamya kuru nandana harsha shoka yutastasmad gantha tirtha nishevakaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else like to try?
Vidura Viturastu tatascharya nishamya kurunandana harsha shok yutas tasmat kanta tirtha nishevakaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, I think you went on mute. Sorry.
Mute. Sorry.
Yes, good enough.
I don't know how that happened. Okay, I'll do it again. Vidura also. Tu, but, tat. That incident. Asharyam, wonderful. Nishamya, seem. Kurunandana, O son of the Kuru dynasty. Harsha, delight. Shoka, grief. Yutaha, affected by. Tashmat, from that place. Ganta, will go away. Tirtha, place of pilgrimage. Nishivaka, for being enlivened. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vidura, being affected with delight and grief, will then leave that place of sacred pilgrimage. Vidura was astonished to see the marvelous departure of his brother Dhritarashtra as a liberated yogi, for in his past life, he was much attached to materialism. Of course, it was only due to Vidura that his brother attained the desirable goal of life. Vidura was therefore glad to learn about it, but he was sorry that he could not make his brother turn into a pure devotee. This was not done by Vidura because of Dhritarashtra being inimical to the Pandavas, who were all devotees of the Lord. An offense at the feet of a Vaishnava is more dangerous than an offense at the feet of the lotus feet of the Lord. Vidura was certainly very liberal to bestow mercy upon his brother Dhritarashtra, whose past life was very materialistic. But ultimately, the result of such mercy certainly depended on the will of the Supreme Lord in the present life. Therefore, Dhritarashtra attained liberation only, and after many such liberated states of life, one can attain to the stage of devotional service. Vidura was certainly very mortified by the death of his brother and sister-in-law, And the only remedy to mitigate such lamentation was to go out on pilgrimage. Thus, Maharaj Yudhisthira had no chance to call back Vidura, his surviving uncle. Om Ekyana Timaranjashya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmalatam Yena Tashme Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Charusamaniti Namane Snigdacheta Surpaneta Vadmanam Drasa Plutam Prabhupada Gata Pranam Bhakti Charapadam. So, just to recap, we know that Dhritarashtra and his wife left the battlefield, left Kurukshetra, and they Dhritarashtra practiced these austerities. So we talked about this in class a couple of weeks ago, that the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, so there's the processes for attaining liberation and nirvana. So this process of attaining liberation through the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is, controlling the breath, drawing the eyes, toward the nose, controlling the body, controlling the mind, all of these things to bring one to controlling the senses, to bring one to this higher state. And liberation is the ultimate goal of this. So in this process, Dhritarashtra quits home. He leaves Kurukshetra and he goes out to in his final days to carry out these yoga processes. Now, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and I'll kind of recap that when one is going through the process of the Yoga Sutras, and if they are not in that mode of devotional service, that the Yoga Sutras will only get one so far. So one can practice all of these austerities, one can practice the tapasya, these austerities, and they can practice, drawing their senses inward, and they're controlling their breath, all of these things, sitting, extended periods of time in meditation. All of these things will, over time, begin, elevate one to a higher level of consciousness, which ultimately, over long periods of time with extended practice, can lead to liberation. However, that is not the goal here. And Krishna states it, man manabhava bhakto, so always think of me, become my devotee, right? So that is not the ultimate goal. The goal is to think of Krishna, to serve Krishna, to become Krishna's devotee, not to perform all of these tapasyas purely for the point of liberation. However, this was Dhritarashtra's best chance, right? This was as high as he could get at this point. Why? He was pretty offensive. He offended the Pandavas. He was very materialistically minded. He was blind, and in the Bhagavad Gita it said that Dhritarashtra was blind, but he was also spiritually blind too. And so we know that Dhritarashtra, he was not a devotee. He was not in that mode of goodness. He was not trying to serve the Lord, to serve the devotees of the Lord, to remember the Lord, to do arati to the Lord. None of those things were in his life. And so because of the mercy of Vidura spent time educating Dhritarashtra on spiritual life in those last days. And because of that mercy from Vidura, his brother, but also from the mercy of Lord Krishna, Dhritarashtra was able to perform these austerities, perform the Yoga Sutras perfectly in order to at least achieve liberation. But as Prabhupada states here, liberation does not mean going back to Godhead. It's two different things. So here it does not make one a devotee of the Lord. So here it says one must go through these tapasyas over and over and over again. So one has to achieve many, many liberated states of life before one can attain the state of devotional service, if that's the path they choose. Now, fortunately for devotees, we have a different path, and that path is serving the Lord, serving the devotees. So here there's something really, in this purport, Prabhupada draws something out that's very important. Dhritarashtra made offenses. He made offenses to the Pandavas, and the Pandavas were most dear to the Lord. The Pandavas were the dearest. The Pandava, Arjun and Queen Kunti and that whole family, they were so dear to the Lord. And when you offend the devotees of the Lord, that is the biggest offense. So this theme to me really spoke to me today about the theme basically really of Vaishnava Aparad. And in Nectar of Instruction, the Rupa Goswami talks about the qualities of a devotee and of a pure devotee, not identifying with the body. Devotees should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. This is in Nectar of Instruction, text 6. So it's really he's talking about what a pure devotee looks like. They don't have ordinary vision. They have some imperfections may seem there, but the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. So in this purport, Prabhupada really makes an excellent point about criticizing the devotee. So one might see a devotee with defects or flaws, but when one criticizes a devotee, he commits an offense called Vaishnava Aparad. And Prabhupada says in his purport, this is very obstructive and dangerous for those who desire to advance in Krishna consciousness. A person cannot derive any spiritual benefit when he offends the lotus feet of a Vaishnava. Everyone should therefore be very careful not to be jealous of an empowered Vaishnava or a Suddha Vaishnava. It is also an offense to consider an empowered Vaishnava an object of disciplinary action. It is offensive to try to give him advice or to correct him. One can distinguish between a neophyte Vaishnava and advanced Vaishnava by their activities. The advanced Vaishnava is always situated as the spiritual master, and the neophyte is always considered his disciple. The spiritual master must not be subjected to the advice of a disciple, nor should a spiritual master be obliged to take instructions from those who are not his disciples. This is the sum and substance of Srila Rupa Goswami's advice on the 6th verse. So he's saying that a pure devotee should be seen as such. They're an extension of the Lord. They are not to be, can be envious. We should not be envious of them. In this purport, Prabhupada also says that an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava is very serious. And Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has described this offense as Hati Mata, or mad elephant disease. And so I'm going to actually go to the verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 19, verse 156. And this is a really well-known verse. It's Yadi Vaishnava Aparad Utahati Mata Upade Va Chinde Tarasuki Yaya Pata. And the translation for this is, if a devotee commits an offense at the feet of a Vaishnava while cultivating the creeper of devotional service in the material world, his offense is compared to a mad elephant that uproots the creeper and breaks it. In this way, the leaves of the creeper are dried up. And I'll read this purport from Chaitanya Charitamrita because I think it's really relevant. One's devotional attitude increases in the association of a Vaishnava. By his personal example, Narottama Das Thakur stresses that a devotee must always remember to please his predecessor Acharya. The Goswamis are represented by one's spiritual master. One cannot be an Acharya or spiritual master without following strictly in the disciplic succession of the Acharyas. One who is actually serious about advancing in devotional service should desire only to satisfy the previous Acharyas. One should always think of oneself as a servant of the Acharyas, and thinking this, one should live in the society of Vaishnavas. However, if one thinks that he has become very mature, it can live separate from the association of Vaishnavas and thus give up all the regulative principles. Due to offending a Vaishnava, one's position becomes very dangerous. Offenses against the holy name are explained in Adi Lila, chapter 8, verse 24. Giving up the regulative principles and living according to one's whims is compared to a mad elephant, which by force uproots the bhakti lata and breaks it to pieces. In this way, the bhakti lata shrivels up. Such an offense is especially created when one disobeys the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called Guru Avyagna. The devotee must therefore be very careful not to commit offenses against the spiritual master by disobeying his instructions. As soon as one is deviated from the instructions of the spiritual master, the uprooting of the bhakti lata begins, and gradually all the leaves dry up. So cultivating that humility, and also remembering that the insults against the devotee are not tolerated, right? So we say in the 10 offenses to blaspheme the devotees who've given up their lives for dedication of the holy, propagation of the holy name of the Lord. That's the, that's key offense there. We don't want to blaspheme the devotees who've dedicated their lives for propagating the holy names of the Lord. So here, again, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's another reference to the blasphemy of Krishna's devotees. And this is Antya Lila, chapter 3, verse 213. So here the translation is, a characteristic of a pure devotee is that he excuses any offense by an ignorant rascal. A characteristic of Krishna, however, is that he cannot tolerate blasphemy of his devotees. And so Krishna says Krishna cannot tolerate any insult or blasphemy against a Vaishnava. For example, Prahlad Maharaj was chastised by his father, Hiranyakashipu, in so many ways. But although Prahlad tolerated this, Krishna did not. The Lord therefore came in the form of Nrsingadev to kill Hiranyakashipu. So when we think about what this all kind of comes down to, it's really what are our actions in this material life. And so we can say devotee, but I think that this can also extend to just whether we're criticizing people in general. And I think becoming very critical can be very damaging to our own spirit as well. So yes, it's impossible to not be critical of what we see, or it's human nature to point out flaws or to say, oh, well, this person did that, I don't like it. And so how do we navigate that without damaging our own consciousness, without damaging our spiritual life? Because blaspheming devotees is, of course, the highest offense, and we must be ultra careful because they have already made a clear distinction in their life that they're trying to serve the Lord, that they are trying to that they are actively engaged in devotional activities. And so when we endeavor in blaspheming devotees, when we commit Vaishnava aparad, as Prabhupada said, we're actually killing our own devotional creeper. So we know the Bhakti Lata Bij, this seed of devotional life, this is planted in us. We have the seed of devotional activity. And how does that seed grow? The seed grows by watering it. And what's the water? And then what's the water is the devotional association by chanting the holy names of the Lord, by studying Shastra, giving ourselves good, following in the footsteps of the acharyas. So good association, good direction. How do we squash that Bhakti Lata, the creeper, is by committing offenses against the devotees, committing offenses against the holy name, by not following the instructions of the spiritual master, right? So we have the 10 offenses, of the holy name given to us, right? And I'm just because I know I'm going to mess them up if I try and repeat them when I'm on the spot. So I'm just going to bring them up. The first one is to blaspheme the devotees who've dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord, right? The third one is to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. The fourth one is to blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures in pursuance of the Vedic version. So here's 3 examples of disobeying or blaspheming. So we have to be really careful. It's given to us here. And then the 7th one is to commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means we shouldn't be going around saying, God told me to do this, or it says in the Shastra that I can go, kill my uncle, and that's okay. So we have to be really careful about our activities and really see ourselves in this beginner mindset, that if we see ourselves as just, beginners, we see ourselves always in that Vaidhi Bhakti, Sadhana Bhakti, we can pray for advancement, but seeing ourselves always in that state of beginner devotional life. Krishna will give us advancement when we're ready, as if we're showing desire to progress. But the key is that we should never see ourselves as advancing, as being advanced, right? This is the careful thing. If we start seeing ourselves as I'm advanced, I'm this, I'm that, I know so much. Now we're starting to get into a more materialistic mentality about our spiritual life. And this can be a deterrent, because if we start seeing ourselves as more advanced than who? Well, then him, clearly, if we, and this can be a really delicate thing, because we can, really criticize devotees. We can criticize others, not just devotees. Thank you, Prabhu. We can criticize devotees and other people, just saying, oh, these karmis, which I'm not a huge fan of. It's tossed around a lot in devotional lingo. The karmis do this, the karmis do that. But I know, I'm trying to be a devotee, but I know I have karmi behaviors. I know I'm not perfect. So I'm certainly not one to judge anyone who's not, chanting the holy names, but, is out there trying to do good work. So this is a careful thing that we want to really be aware of. And so here we can see the 10 offenses to the holy name should be taken seriously, because it's not just about the making offenses to the Lord. It's also, really making offenses to the spiritual master, making offenses to the Shastra, to the scriptures. And so here we're gaining good instruction. And I've always said that the Shastra is there to provide us understanding of Krishna and understanding of Krishna's devotees, but it's also there to provide us understanding of our own devotional path forward. And if we take the Shastras in such a way that we will see our path forward devotionally through these examples, then we can progress. But we progress cautiously, right? We progress cautiously, knowing that the progress that we're making is only by the mercy of the Lord. And this is the Lord's causeless mercy, because it says here in this purport even that it's because of the mercy of the Lord that Dhritarashtra was actually able to achieve liberation. If the Lord didn't will it, it would not have happened. He could have been just sitting there and waiting, and just, died of natural causes, sitting in the forest waiting for death. But Krishna willed it. So, he gave him that benediction of allowing him to achieve liberation. This is the mercy of the Lord, the causeless mercy. It means that we don't have to do anything specific to receive Krishna's causeless mercy. It's just Krishna can decide any time to provide mercy to us, us souls here in the material life. And so through that, we proceed with our spiritual life. We understand where the pitfalls are. If we understand the trappings of devotional life, we can better avoid them. And this is why we chant the 10 offenses to the holy name. We want to try and chant them every day. It's good to chant them when we finish our the morning program. It's usually done in the morning in Mangala Arati is when the 10 offenses are chanted, but we can chant them after we finish our japa. It's another good time to chant the 10 offenses. And so, so we know that if these things, so we don't want to blaspheming devotees dedicate their lives to propagating the holy names of the Lord. This is very dangerous. And this is what is happening here. Dhritarashtra could not get any further. He got as far as he could get given his offenses. And that's pretty far, actually. It's pretty far, because he received the instructions from his brother and he received the mercy of Krishna. Now, we are all hoping to we're all on this path of Krishna consciousness, trying to advance in our own way. But given the instructions by Srila Prabhupada or by our spiritual master, if we've taken initiation, if not, then Srila Prabhupada is the preeminent Shiksha Guru for all of us, and he is anyway. Even if we've taken initiation, that Srila Prabhupada is what's considered that preeminent Shiksha Guru. and he is there to instruct us. But we know that Srila Prabhupada was very adamant, very, very adamant about not committing Vaishnava aparad, because it is so deadly to our spiritual life. And Vaishnava aparad is mentioned multiple times throughout, and throughout the literature. And it's in the Srimad Bhagavatam chapter in the 4th canto, chapter 26. Here in the purport, Prabhupada says again, pure consciousness can be revived by the process of sacrifice, charity, pious activities, etc. But when one pollutes his Krishna consciousness by offending a Brahmana or a Vaishnava, is very difficult to revive. That's pretty strong. So how do we recover from that? There's examples in Bhagavad Gita chapter 6. What's a fallen yogi to do? How does what's the outcome of a fallen yogi? And Krishna says, well, they might come back in a Brahmin family. They come back in a more auspicious condition. Anything that they've done up until that point is reserved for their next lifetime. But here it's saying it's hard to come back from an offense to a devotee. So this isn't to scare anyone, right? This isn't, but it is to really put an emphasis on our activities. And I personally have really worked hard on this, in my life in general, and it's so difficult. It is so difficult because it is the nature of us to want to gossip, talk about someone. It's very attractive to our material brain to speak of others. And so how do we combat this nature? How do we combat this inclination of the jiva of this and rise above it? And so I'm no expert because I'm still working on it myself. I mean, it's one of those things that is part of this, like I said, it's part of this material world that is really difficult to overcome, but it is so detrimental to our spiritual life, because we never know when we're speaking of someone who they are in their hearts. So we may think someone displays certain qualities externally, but we don't know internally what their relationship is with God. No one knows that relationship but Krishna. Truly, even we can think we know our own relationship with Krishna, but Krishna really knows our relationship with him the best, because he sees everything. He sees everything. And yesterday I was just having kind of a wonky day, and I was reflecting and thinking, gosh, I really wish I just loved Krishna more. And I was reading this book, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know if anyone's read this book. It's actually a book of his experience in the Jewish concentration camps in Nazi Germany back in the 1940s. Pretty heavy. It's a quick read. You can read most of it in about an hour and a half. It's a quick read. But I decided to kind of thumb through that book the other day, and was just really picking up some important points about life in a concentration camp and survival, and what were really the things that brought people out of it. Like, who were it wasn't the ones that came in with the strongest bodies, that were the most fit, or the smartest. It wasn't those that were the smartest either. It was the ones who had compassion for others, but who also had a deep spiritual inclination and had a deep faith that ultimately they were going to, no matter what happens, that it was going to be okay. If they died, it was going to be okay. If they survived, it was going to be by the mercy of God. And so, so this is something that I was reflecting on the other day about how can I, if I were in a situation that was really dire, how would I respond? Would I turn to base behaviors, kind of like those base survival techniques? Probably. We all might do that to some degree. But would I also, hunker down in a faith that Krishna was there? Krishna was there to take care of me, and that no matter what happened, that Krishna was the ultimate, decider. It was his mercy, one way or another, what happened to me. And so we think about in our everyday lives, how are we pleasing the Lord? How are we connecting in our relationship with Lord? What are the things that we're doing? Are we really fixed in our mind in a relationship? And that's something, to think about. Are our activities throughout the day resembling that of a devotee? Are we committing Vaishnava aparad and just kind of blowing past it, thinking, well, that person's a jerk anyway, and who cares? And, or are we really trying hard to, see the soul and the super soul in every living entity? And that takes some practice, but it's what Prabhupada instructed us to do. It's what, a Madhava, the Uttama Adhikari, right? The Uttama Adhikari sees the spirit soul in every living entity, regardless of whether they're, a dog eater or doesn't matter. He sees the Uttama Adhikari sees the soul, the super soul, sees God in every living entity. And that means that we treat them, as another spirit soul. But, so this is where it can get a little bit tricky, because, if someone offends us, do we accept that? Are we humbler than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree? Or do we stand up and say, hey, that's not okay? Or does someone else stand up for us? So how do we draw that line? Where is that in our devotional practice? So the Shikshastika prayers are, Sunichina Amanina Maha Sadahari. It's the Shikshastika. I know I'm going to butcher it, so I have to just look it up. Okay. So here it's the Ayinanda Trinad Api Suni Chena Tara Api Suni Chena Amanina Mahadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. So one should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking of oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord. So offering all respect to others, that means that we are seeing the super soul. We're seeing God in everyone. That we're also accepting offenses, which can be really challenging, because we might want to say, like, hey, I want to stick up for myself. This isn't okay. So, so it's finding that line for our own sadhana. If we're in a place in our spiritual life that if we don't try and stand up for ourselves, it will hurt our sadhana, meaning we'll sit there and we'll stew over it and create more aparad in our mind and maybe talk about it to others and really make a mess of the situation by not standing up for ourselves. And we just, kind of just accept it, but then begrudgingly, and then we're just, it's just creating this darkness in us about the situation. That can be almost worse for our spiritual life. If we're someone that can just truly walk away and be like, that hurt, but, I'm good with it. And someone else might step in and maybe come to the defense of that person. But we have to also be true to where we are in our own hearts to say, okay, I don't want to create offenses here, because the more that I sit with this situation and stew on it, the more I'm going to be creating offenses in my mind too. Because remember, Vaishnava aparad isn't just about talking to others. We can create aparad right here very easily. Because guess what? Who's hearing everything? Krishna. So So we may think, oh, I don't create a Vaishnava aparad. Oh no, I'm fine. You know, like, but what's our brain saying to us? Like what's happening in our head? And and this is where being really aware of our thoughts is important. And so if we're stewing, if someone may have created an offense, we perceive an offense created against us. And if we don't talk it through with that person, and we just try and accept it, try to take the high road and accept it, but we're not there yet. And then we sit there and just in our brain, you know, and stew over it. That's not helping us. Right. So, you know, I think one of the things that I've really been kind of on a mission in our movement to foster with my own relationships and to kind of encourage others to do this is sitting down and having meaningful conversations with people that have hurt us. And that's not easy to do because if we don't do that, it can be a very slippery slope. So sitting down when we're ready, not when we're hot in the head, you know, because that's just can make things worse, but making, you know, time. I had a situation with another devotee and it was, you know, I felt very hurt. This other devotee felt very hurt. And it took a couple of years to sit down and have a tearful, meaningful conversation that really healed the relationship going forward. And so, but I think that's really important in our devotional lives is that rather than stewing or creating aparad, that we actually find within ourselves when we're ready to sit down and have a heartfelt, meaningful conversation with the other person or persons to try and sort it out. And sorting it out is coming from a place of vulnerability, which can be hard sometimes, and humility, right? So, but this is in my opinion, this is just my opinion, it's my observation, you know, from kind of a coaching psychology, human observation perspective that, you know, it's when there are these relationship hiccups, the Pandavas got into it with the Kurus, right? You know, they just sat down and had a meaningful conversation. I'm just kidding. But I mean, there's aspects of that if we can, you know, sit down rather than turning our backs and saying, oh, you know, that person, I just can't work with them anymore. I'm not going to deal with them anymore. Or they're this or they're that. And I hear it all the time. And you know, it's just, we have to be really careful because aparad can happen so easily, so quickly. And it's so damaging to our devotional creeper. So when we find ourselves, if and when we find ourselves in a place where we're feeling critical of someone, that we, you know, try and step back, try and count in those moments all of the good qualities of that person to offset the critical thoughts. And then think, do I need to sit down and have a meaningful conversation with this person soon? And try and, you know, put everything out on the table in a place of vulnerability and humility. And so anyway, I'll just kind of end it there. For me, it was today a nice reflection on kind of our internal climate, on our devotional creeper and how we interact with one another. So I'll open it up for reflections, questions, thoughts.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much for a wonderful explanation of this verse. And as this verse brings out this very important topic of Vaishnava aparad and how should we avoid it, very, very important for a devotional life. I'm sure a lot of devotees on the call will have some questions, some reflections, some comments. So devotees, you can unmute yourself and you can raise your hand, you can comment. I already see and say Mataji raising the hand, so I will open the forum for discussion. Go ahead, Mataji, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisance, August Prabhupada. Very nice class, I have to say, and a very key point, you know, of Vaishnava aparad. And as you were speaking about it, I was Googling the definition of blasphemy just to get a clear understanding. And it's pretty heavy because it actually says it's the act of insulting or humiliating someone. And then you added the point of it actually starts from the mind before it comes over here, which is very, very powerful. From the mind to the mouth is very, very powerful. And what's coming to my mind, Prabhu, and I wanted to ask if you could shed some light on it, is when we were told, we have heard that if a person hangs out with smokers, they are judged by that person also being a smoker, even though he doesn't smoke. So my question, Prabhu, is and I see this happen in our devotional communities everywhere, is when we associate with devotees who are offending other devotees, then what?
Well, it's said that we should run the opposite direction. It's really when we're in, if we can't dispel it, if we can make an attempt to try and dispel it and say, hey, this person's a good devotee, let's be careful. If those efforts are in vain, then run. Do not be associated with the conversation, because it's not serving our own consciousness. It is birds of a feather, right? Birds of a feather flock together, and we have to be careful, because it's not difficult suddenly to get pulled down just a little bit. And I say pulled down because that conversation is going to be a pulling down effect. It will pull us down into a bad place. And so we have to be really careful to avoid those conversations. So if we hear Vaishnava aparad occurring, we should get out of Dodge, especially if it's with a senior devotee where we are not in a position to instruct or diffuse. We just leave, just walk away, just completely walk away. Maybe you can address it later. I was in a situation years and years ago where at one of our, within the community, there was some devotees that were just every week, it was the same thing. It was like, and we just stopped going. We stopped staying behind. We would just, as soon as the program was over, we just left. And we actually had finally kind of worked up the courage to have a conversation with one of the key people. That was, it was after the fact, it was in a very different setting. And we sat this person down and said, this is making us uncomfortable. This is why we're leaving right away. And, so, at all costs, get out. I can't stress it enough.
So true, Prabhu. So I have a piggyback question to that. What if, and again, I ask this because it exists in our in our communities, in our society. That's the word, and sometimes I think what happens, Prabhu, is in the name of Vaishnavism, in the name of, but he's a devotee of the Lord, but that devotee of the Lord is offending another devotee. It may not be verbal, but it's by action. Like, but then it comes to, and I've heard that many times, but he's a devotee. Yes, but that person who you say is a devotee is offending another devotee by actions.
Yeah.
Do they still walk away, Prabhu?
No, I think that ultimately there's aparad, and then there's, taking action against something that needs to be taken care of. We can treat that in terms of, I hate to pull it out to the, forefront, but there's the child abuse and scandals and women's rights. So there's certain things that need to be brought out in the open. I think there's a way to do it without completely ripping someone down. But I think that the more that these topics are discussed openly, the more that they can be dealt with. Now, when someone, what I've observed and what I've heard is that when someone is committing an offense toward another individual, then we can, if we're not in the position to go to that person, if they're senior to us, then we go to someone else that's senior to them, or at least a peer, and have a discussion and say, I've observed some behavior that I have concerns about. And I need to address this in my own heart with someone that might be able to hear my voice, you know. And so this is the thing that's really, and I think this is where as a society we can get into a bit of sticky situations and hot water, because we don't want to offend, but that doesn't mean also giving the bypass to everyone too, right? Like, so we have to find that middle ground where we're not, if we're just saying, oh, that person's, you know, they're unadvanced, they're a horrible person, they're just, you know, evil or this or that, you know, just spouting out these kind of judgments is not beneficial. But if we say, oh, this person in this specific situation has carried out this behavior that was very damaging, I mean, that's just stating observation of something that occurred. That's, to me, in my personal opinion, I don't see that as aparad. I see that as like, hey, this, you know, if someone walks in, if a devotee walks into a temple room that's a senior devotee and they're very elevated, and they come in and they start like, you know, like shouting and, or like, you know, doing something that's out of the ordinary, you know, we would take them out and say, hey, Prabhu, you know, there's a problem here. You need, this needs, and that's, I've seen that happen. Like, so, you know, it's just that we have to address the actions, of the person, and not rip the person themselves apart. We need to separate the actions, and the person might be carrying out the actions, but the actions have to be addressed. And if the actions are damaging, then the actions need to be appropriately dealt with. And the actions, and that person's choosing to carry out those actions, then that person is tied to that particular action. So, you know, aparad is, you know, I think just because we have a hurt feeling and we're saying that this devotee is this and this and this, when actually that there might have been a misunderstanding or a conflict. But if there's a devotee that's actually doing harm repeatedly in a situation, and no one's addressing it in any kind of a professional manner, that's going to create problems, and we see it all the time.
Yes. Oh, yes. Actually, as you're speaking, Prabhu, I'm remembering a statement made by my spiritual master many years ago. He says that exactly how you said your last sentence. You know, he said that if we see an action happening that is offensive to a senior devotee, and if we see it but we don't do anything about it, but we allow it to go on, it's like we are supporting it.
We're complicit.
Yes, we are supporting it. No, you know, if we know that this devotee is causing aparad to another senior devotee or whatever, and this devotee is just still hanging out with this devotee who's making offenses, is saying, yeah, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So even the person that is supporting that guy, whatever, girl or guy or whatever, to go on is saying, yeah, it's okay, because it's legit kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But actually that person is also looked upon as, you know, birds of a feather flock together, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in our society, I think we have to really discern, and it takes some, it takes some care, let's say. I think we have to discern between aparad and damaging behavior, and when to, you know, and what to do, you know, when there's, what is it aparad, or is it that this person actually is his or her behavior is very damaging and creating difficulties for others that needs to be addressed. So bringing that up to another person in a way that says, look, I'm not calling this person XYZ. I'm just saying this person seems to have presented behavior that has caused X, Y, and Z effect. You know, there's a way to phrase it. I think that we can be very kind of like, you know, neutral about it, but stating the facts. You know, this happened, this was the result, this is not a good situation, and address it accordingly. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for this very practical question that as a devotee we try to ignore, but that doesn't help anyone, including ourselves, because we also get trapped into at least the results of those actions. You know, if we are not addressing it properly in whatever capacity we can, we should address these kind of behaviors, because what we have to think is the larger picture. it's not about me, it's about the mission, it's about Srila Prabhupada's mission, the Lord's mission. And if there is some obstruction to that, some kind of negative behaviors, like you said, at least those behaviors needs to be addressed. And I don't know if anyone else has any question, because I don't see any hand raised. One important point, Mataji, you mentioned is in those situations we should talk to the person, and try to address it. What if those talks are not also helping? Because very practically, devotees at some point they get tired and they talk to each other and try to address. But if the person is really very egoistic or not ready to change, then that doesn't happen, right? So at I think that point, there are only limited choices we have.
Yeah, I think that at that point, then we have to make a personal decision to heal our own hearts around the situation, because at that point, we're only damaging ourselves if we continue to carry any negative feelings about the situation. If we've made an attempt to reconcile, the attempt was not received. And if we continue to carry on with negative feelings around that situation or that person, then we're just hurting ourselves. So the best thing, in my opinion, in my experience, is that, okay, I've tried, keep a cordial distance, and prevent any other negative interactions from happening, and kind of isolate it and move on from that person, because some people just are who they are, and sometimes we're humans. Sometimes we just don't all get along so great. Different personalities, different viewpoints, different ideologies. We see it even in ISKCON. We have extreme right, we have extreme left, and everything in the middle. There's gonna be clashes. So the best thing that we can do is just accept that person this is where they're at, this is who I am, this is who they are, and I'm choosing to not have association. Just because someone's a devotee doesn't mean we have to associate with them. We just have to be cordial, just be polite. I call it kind of like the Haribol treatment. It's like, okay, we can just Haribol, and move on. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's a wonderful, wonderful response. Yeah, just because somebody is devotee doesn't mean that we have to abide by their, even the negative behaviors. So thank you. Anyone else? It's about 9 o'clock now. Anyone else have any comments?
I really like the point you said, Prabhu, about the damaging behavior. How damaging behavior can affect others. Like I've seen situations, senior devotee is giving class, others that are not in good terms get up and leave, and then you have the others who are watching and saying, oh, I guess it's okay, the damaging behavior. I think that's a very key point, that sometimes we get caught up in the sentimentalism, I think is the word, the sentimentalism of Krishna consciousness, the sentimentalism of Vaishnavism, where, oh, it's a devotee, but it's a damaging behavior that others are watching and saying, I guess it is bona fide to get up and walk out, because you're so right, bro. The damaging behavior is sometimes not, I think many times unaware, probably even, ignorant. They're just ignorant about the damaging behavior, which I think is detrimental.
Yeah. I think there is a fear of, because it's not affecting us, but it's not about, again, us. We have to see the whole spectrum, what it is affecting, the whole thing. And sometimes we want to keep the cordial relationship with everyone. The danger of not having the full understanding of Vaishnava Aparadh, what really it means. Those things also can come into picture here. So yeah, thank you, Mataji, for bringing that point.
Yeah, and what you said, Prabhu, is very relevant, not having a full understanding of Vaishnava Aparadh. If we take it to be very surface, it can cause us to not address bad behavior.
Right.
So we have to be careful. So it's a good conversation that we can delve into with these classes. And
No,
I'll go
this-
there. It's fine. I don't
Yeah,
mind.
very practical. Thank you so much. It is 9:05. If no other questions, no other comments, thank you, Mataji, for this wonderful class and wonderful conversation. And we'll look forward to your association soon in the future.
Thank you very much,
So-
Prabhu.
And thank you all the devotees for joining us this morning. And we will see all of you tomorrow morning again, same time, 8 a.m.
Wonderful.
And Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Vansha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji.